There are no shadows in the Underdark. Only after years on the surface have I come to understand the significance of that seemingly minute fact. The significance of the contrast between light and darkness. There are no shadows in the Underdark, no areas of mystery where only the imagination can go. What a marvelous thing is a shadow. I have seen my own silhouette walk under me as the sun rode high. I have seen a gopher grow to the size of a large bear, the light low behind him spreading his ominous silhouette far across the ground. I have walked through the woods at twilight, my gaze alternating between lighter areas and catching the last rays of day, leafy green slipping to gray, and darkened patches where only my mind's eye could go. Might a monster be there? An orc or a goblin? Or might a hidden treasure, as magnificent as a lost, enchanted sword, or as simple as a fox's den, lay within the sheltering gloom? When I walk the woods at twilight, my imagination walks beside me, heightening my senses, opens my mind to any possibility. But there are no shadows in the Underdark, no room for fanciful imagination. All, everywhere, is gripped in a broadening, continual predatory hush and a real, ever-present danger. To imagine a crouched enemy or a hidden treasure is an exercise in enjoyment, a conjured state of alertness, but when that enemy is too often real and not imagined, when every jag in the stone, every potential hiding place becomes a source of tension, then the game is not so much fun. One cannot walk the corridors of the Underdark with his imagination beside him. To imagine an enemy behind a stone might well blind a person to the very real enemy behind another. To slip into a daydream is to lose that edge of readiness, and in the Underdark, to be unwary is to die. This proved the most difficult transition for me when I went back to those lightless corridors. I had to again become the primal hunter, surviving every moment on that instinctual edge, a state of nervous energy that kept my muscles taut, always ready to spring every step of the way. The present was all that mattered, the search for potential hiding places of potential enemies. I could not afford to imagine those enemies. I had to wait for them and watch for them, react to any movements. There are no shadows in the Underdark. There is no room for imagination in the Underdark. It is a place of alertness, but not aliveness, a place with no room for hopes and dreams.
The Underdark, Deep Earth, the realms below, the night below, the lightless lands. Surface dwellers refer to the maze of tunnels and caverns beneath their feet by these names and many more. I have heard that other worlds are not nearly as honeycombed with tunnels as the one in which I was born, but I can only speculate as to the reasons why. For eons, earthquakes, volcanoes, and great rivers of water have cleaved caverns and chasms in the bedrock. Creatures such as purple worms, umber hulks, and Zorn burrow tunnels through earth and stone in search of minerals and prey. Beholders disintegrate columns of stone. Dwarves, gnomes, and other races mine for gold, jewels, and other precious treasures. They reroute subterranean rivers and transform the realm of Dumathoin and Caladuran through feats of engineering. The weave has undoubtedly played a crucial role in the deep earth, for vast cavern networks suddenly appear from time to time, leaving pockets of Underdark radiation, known to the Drow as treacherous, in their wake. And races flourish. The Underdark is a world unto itself, a nightmarish labyrinth filled with horrors unimaginable to those who bathe in the daily light above.
While nature has certainly taken root in the tunnels that crisscross Aber Tiril, Deep Earth is dominated by malevolent beings whose ancestors, including my own, fled the purifying light of day for the cloaking darkness of eternal night. Despite their differences, however, the worlds above and below Chantia's gossamer robe are inextricably linked. Some who dwell in the realms above seek to explore the landscape beneath, trade with its inhabitants, and plunder the riches of its strange terrain. For the very same reasons, some who dwell in the realms below venture to the world above. The events of the past dozen years, especially the war between Menzoberranzan and the allied forces of Mithril Hall, and the emerging alliance between Lurur and Blingdenstone, have forged new ties between the bright realms of the north and the night below. The south, whence the ancestors of Clan Battlehammer emigrated, has long been intertwined with the remnants of deep Shanatar. To the east and west lie unknown realms above and below the surface, but I suspect that they too are more tightly linked than the inhabitants of either world realize. For those who would delve into the wonders and terrors of the Underdark, I offer this guide to the world I escaped but never left behind.
Getting in and getting out. Before embarking on an expedition into the Underdark, one must discover a way down. And, more important, back up. Finding routes usually requires deep research. Not every cave connects with the Underdark, just as not every upward sloping tunnel breaches the surface. Ruins, dungeons, and tombs are good starts. Many subterranean complexes were originally constructed by dwarves, and the stout folk often link their holds through a network of pre-existing tunnels. Even dungeons built by those ignorant of the Underdark sometimes link to it, for denizens of the deep are as likely to tunnel up in search of treasure as surface dwellers are to delve down. Magical transport is another way to reach the Underdark. Although less effective or reliable than one might wish, for reasons not well understood, Dritzz inhabits and distorts movement spells such as Dimension Door, Teleport, and Teleport Without Error. Spells from the school of divination and magical scrying devices are also affected, although these effects are far less well understood. Furthermore, the effects of Dritzz on magical transport go beyond the immediate environs of such sources. Casters employ such spells only at great personal risk, even if the destination is well known. Generally, teleport magic does not reliably operate beyond a half mile. To confuse the issue, some Underdark regions allow spells to function more or less as expected. Explorers who seek safer magical transport into the Underdark are advised to find permanent gates that seem to function even near Dritzz. Be warned, however, that gates are few and far between. Known gates are usually well defended on both sides. Escaping the Underdark is often more challenging than one might think. Even experienced explorers are easily lost. Maps and trails markers are generally less effective than above ground, as the very walls can move or disappear, and one cannot look to the stars for course correction. Magical navigation aids are highly recommended, including arrows of direction, known direction spells, and scrolls of mapping. Small, almost unnoticed tremors can wreak unexpected havoc on a planned return route, as can the deliberate or indifferent actions of burrowing creatures. Explorers are well advised to equip themselves with magical means of tunneling, such as dig spells or spades of colossal excavation. The enveloping darkness. The first challenge of the Underdark is the lack of light. For races adapted to life below ground, the ability to sense heat amply compensates for poor illumination. However, many surface dwellers, including humans and some halflings, are essentially blind in the Underdark. Alestro was kind enough to provide Capri with an enchanted cat's eye agate for a trip to Menzo Baronzon. It enabled her to see as well as a drow or a dwarf. Some wizards have access to spell formulas such as improvision that create similar helpful enchantments. Enchanted hotstones crafted by the Sniff Niblin enhance the range of vision by radiating heat reflected off the surrounding stone, providing the infravisual equivalent of a torch. Magical solutions such as these have the obvious benefit of not spoiling an ally's infravision. Although light sources in the Underdark draw attention, most inhabitants cannot tolerate strong light and keep their distance. Also, mobility and awareness are critical in the subterranean environment. Beings primarily reliant on sight to navigate have no chance of survival when blind. However, should your torch or lamp die, be prepared for a sudden attack from the fading shadows. Torches fashioned on the surface for the night hours are commonly made from dry wood soaked in pitch, but any flammable substance will suffice. If torch supplies run low in an Underdark environment, certain varieties of toadstool, identified by their deep purple caps known as torch stalks, provide a good, slow-burning alternative. Be aware that a few varieties of torch stalk are explosive when burned, releasing a cloud of spores that can slowly kill an individual if inhaled. In some cases, dangerous torch stalks can be identified by the bones on the surrounding cavern floor, remnants of the carrier and fertilizer. Unfortunately, in many cases the bones have been carried off by other predators, leaving no hint of the danger. Other sources of fuel are dried roth, dung, and bat guano, which burn well but smell like shit. Carrying a large supply of torches or oil is impractical for extended expeditions into the Underdark. So many explorers rely on magical illumination. Be forewarned, however, that such stormers can easily be dispelled or countered. An apocryphal tale often repeated in the Waterhaven Tavern known as the Yawning Portal speaks of an arrogant human wizard who relied solely on his spells for light during an extended Underdark expedition. He had to extend his entire roster of spells and got separated from his companions during a melee with a Drow patrol. The wizard found himself alone in the darkness, still carrying a spellbook, but unable to read it to rememorize a continual light spell. Not all the Underdark lives in blackness, of course. The rocks containing Phasris emit eerie blue and green light. Luminescent lichen, fungi, and mosses light many subterranean grottos. Although most varieties quickly fade if disturbed or removed, one species commonly cultivated by the Drow is blue glowfan fungi, which glows for several hours after being disturbed. The Drow also consume blue glowfan fungi. It is poisonous, however, to other races. Ormu is a fluorescent green moss that grows in damp tunnels and steamy caverns, usually near geothermal steam vents. Drow females often employed this moss in powdered form as eyeshadow. When mixed with glowworm juice, it forms a luminescent paint used for heraldic symbols and for scribing magical scrolls and tomes. Baruchis, also known as crimson splitters, are fungi that glow cherry red. If disturbed, they release a cloud of deadly spores that kill almost any creature except for the worm-like grubbers that feed on them. A related but more insidious issue for surface dwellers in a subterranean environment is the lack of their accustomed means of noting the passage of time. The sun does not rise or set, nor can one note moon phases or constellation drift. Tales speak of explorers who lost their way for just a few days, yet emerged claiming to have spent weeks or years below. The lack of familiar timepieces can create problems with identifying time to eat, sleep, or prey. Since ferrying a never-wintering water clock into the Underdark is impractical, most explorers turn to common subterranean measures. For example, Drow sentinels often measure the length of their duty tours by counting the number of times a stone basin is tilled by a constant trickle of water, emptying water into their water skins every time the basin is ready to overflow. Upper Underdark inhabitants measure days by observing when bats exit and return. Drow patrols often coordinate ambushes by counting hand fades, a unit of time based on how long it takes heat to dissipate from a rock after briefly placing one's hand on it. Subterranean landscapes. Above ground vegetation, rivers, bodies of water, and mountain peaks slow travel. The Underdark has these, and more uniquely subterranean impediments. Passages twist and turn rarely in a constant direction or on a level floor. Tunnels vary in height and width, sometimes striking down to a crack or widening to great grottos. Rivers and lakes can fill entire caverns. Vast patches of deadly plants and fungi block miles of passage. Because of these impediments, sometimes a direct route between here and there simply does not exist. In the Underdark, a traveler must prepare for all sorts of three-dimensional terrain. Climbing on slick, brittle, and sharp rock faces requires reliable aid. Underdark explorers need great skill in rock climbing, or even better, the ability to levitate or fly. Pack animals must navigate such terrain as well. While surface-dwelling dwarfs sometimes use mules, most major Underdark races employ riding lizards, steeders, or subterranean lizards in lieu of horses, oxen, and wagons. Rivers and subterranean lakes are rarer obstacles, but often serve as the most efficient means of travel. Many deep delvers ferry small boats into the tunnels below or build them from giant mushrooms. Magical treasures, such as folding boats, are highly prized. The lack of wind usually makes sailing craft useless, so most vessels are rowed or towed by aquatic draft animals. Often a cavern ceiling dips below the water's surface, requiring the explorer to creatively navigate the cold and dark waters. Necessities of life. The Underdark is like a desert scattered with oases. All the basic necessities of life, food, water, air, and shelter are in short supply, and the competition to survive is brutal. Most surface dwellers are accustomed to a diet of meat, cheese, fruits, vegetables, and grains. Subterranean fare is similar, but with important differences. Domesticated deep broth are common in the Underdark, as almost every part of these cattle is useful, in addition to the meat and milk they provide. Cave pigs are also used for food and clothing, and wild deep broth herds are occasionally found too. Fungi, lichen, molds, and mosses replace most agriculture produce, and some are used to brew alcohol. For example, the stalk of tremolac, an edible mushroom that tastes somewhat like bread, can be eaten after cleaning it, soaking it in water for an hour, and drying it by a fire. When Nimmergan, a giant mushroom species, is sealed in a cask and left to die, a parasitic fungus consumes it and forms a drinkable fermented liquid, also called Nimmergan. Nonetheless, surface dwellers are advised to bring their own provisions, for many fungi, lichens, molds, mosses are poisonous or capable of defending themselves. Priests who can magically create food are a welcome alternative to foraging. Fresh water is scarce in some regions of the surface world, but it is more precious than gold in the Underdark. Like food, magically created water is an invaluable resource to explorers. Deep earth denizens get no rain, so they rely on rivers, lakes, and seepage through the rocks for water. Every permanent Underdark community has access to a permanent water supply, and disruption of a water supply leads to quick action. While most subterranean waterways are freshwater, saltwater sometimes breaches near or beneath seas. For this reason, few Underdark communities settle beneath seabeds. However, deep-sea creatures sometimes create unique ecosystems, such as in the fabled Sea Dark, a subterranean sea beneath the eastern Sea of Fallen Stars, and the Altumble Peninsula. Linked to the water above by three great trenches, the Sea Dark is home to aquatic beholderkin and the eel-like anguillians. Another hazard is the scarcity of breathable air. Most populated Underdark caverns are sufficiently ventilated, but not always by surface connection. Denizens of my native environment are well aware of fireweed, a heat-absorbing plant that converts heat into food and foul toxins into breathable air. Fireweed makes volcanic regions survivable, and lifeless tunnels relatively fertile. Surface dwellers who deliberately or unwillingly damage stands or fireweed are quickly dispatched by the plant. A different tactic employed by the Sniffniblin involves using puffball salamanders as a means of detecting bad air. These small, harmless creatures swell up like a bullfrog when air starts to go bad. By keeping a close eye on a caged puffball salamander, Underdark explorers can buy a few minutes to escape before being overcome by toxins. Basically a canary in a coal mine operation. Although the Underdark seemingly supplies innumerable shelters, explorers are advised to choose carefully. Shelters here are chosen for defensive reasons, not for protection from the elements. Multiple escape routes are vital, for many creatures burrow through solid stone. As deep earth inhabitants are more accustomed to battling in tight confines, I recommend surface dwellers seek defensible plateaus in large caverns, selecting terrain akin to their normal environment. The Endless Hunt. I survived a decade alone in the wilds of the Underdark, only by becoming a hunter in both body and mind, a wild beast of the lightless lands, as cunning and deadly as any who stalked those tunnels. Even then, only the aid of Guinevere kept me sane. Generally, the civilized inhabitants of Deep Earth stick close to their inn caves, venturing forth only in groups to patrol, mine, or trade. In the wilds, heed any sign of recent activity. Predators tend to haunt well-traveled routes. Scavengers tend to lurk in such regions as well, much as jackals shadow the mighty lions of the Shar. At the same time, tunnels that appear unused usually are unused for good reasons. Even passive creatures in the Underdark defend themselves and their territory with deadly ability. As in the world above, monsters tend to leave evidence of their presence. Spores, heat signatures, broken cave formations, and disturbed fungi are all signs to the weary traveler. The Underdark is disturbingly silent for someone accustomed to the murmur of life above, but echoes travel far, alerting all manner of beings. When I was in the academy in Menzoberranzan, I learned early on to solve the riddle of an echo pattern and locate its source, although not always quickly enough. The Drow walk lightly and employ boots of elvenkind to mask their passage. We employ a sophisticated language of hand signals to obviate the need for speech in dangerous environs. Spells that generate magical silence or sound bubbles also suffice. The well-known priest spell that generates magical silence in a 15-foot radius also has the unfortunate drawback of preventing external sounds from reaching the cloaked individuals, so beware. Subterranean patrols, mining expeditions, and trading casters are always equipped to defend themselves. Scouts lurk in the vanguard and rearguard as any such group, on the alert for attacks from any direction, even above and below. Patrols usually separate into smaller bands to prevent foes from trapping them in a narrow tunnel or dead-end passageway. Ambushes and counter-ambushes are common, and hit-and-run tactics are the norm. A favorite Drow tactic is to levitate near a cavern ceiling while cloaked in magical darkness. Mining expeditions are particularly dangerous, for they generate a great deal of noise and must be defensible. Dwarves and Sniff-Niblin always establish traps and blinds in the surrounding tunnels before excavating, and they keep numerous escape routes ready. Although not constrained to a single location, caravans must ply regular routes navigable by their draft animals and/or slaves. Most successful caravan masters hire 2 or 3 patrols to accompany their expeditions, leading or trailing them, and would-be raiders sometimes never even see the target before being destroyed by the accompanying patrols. Caravans are most vulnerable when navigating treacherous terrain. Smart cavern masters establish a range of defensible fortifications similar to those employed by miners before continuing their journey. All this preparation makes trade an expensive prospect in the Underdark. The realms below. Although conceivably one could pass within a few feet of a teeming Underdark enclave without knowing it, such an occurrence is rare. Like the cities above, subterranean settlements show signs of nearby population. Patrols, caravans, and mining operations are common, and few deep earth races allow interlopers to approach without challenge. Not every settlement welcomes members of other races, and those that do generally admit only those who arrive as slaves or merchants. As a Menzoberranzan noble, I was largely insulated from the ebb and flow of commerce, but a few hard truths became apparent after several decades of casual observance. Underdark merchants ensure their continual freedom and lives by taking many precautions. The most basic defense is to make it more costly to seize wares than to purchase them. A would-be buyer often tests a merchant's defenses before concluding a transaction. Merchants tend to ally into casters, fellowships, and companies to make such attacks more costly. Despite the dangers, trade is the lifeblood of many isolated Underdark enclaves, and merchants increase their security by establishing regular clients. Visitors must be well versed in the mores of the local culture, for offending a matron mother, for example, is a quick, messy way to end one's life. In general, explorers from the surface world are wise to confine themselves to the upper Underdark, where a reasonable amount of interaction with the world above still exists. The middle Underdark is the domain of the main Underdark races, but these mostly see beings from the surface as slaves. The lower Underdark remains largely unknown. Truly alien societies thrive there with cultures wholly incomprehensible to surface dwellers. I have spent little time there myself and would not recommend it to anyone else. Of course, I would not recommend you travel into the Underdark at all.
Let's go! Underdark civilizations. I have walked the wilds of the Underdark for countless unseen sunrises. And in all the world never have I met a predatory species as dangerous as those who dwell in the bastions of so-called civilization that have grown up in the depths of the night below, impenetrable. Lurker Sornseth Deepsong, herald of the Night's Fallen, year of the Remembering Stones. While a thin veneer of familiarity cloaks Underdark enclaves, most are alien, nightmarish cousins of the cities found above. Whereas on the surface, civilized races live in settlements of varying sizes, the perils of the Underdark are such that few individuals or groups survive outside a fortress city. The Underdark is more akin to an archipelago in a dead sea than a temperate habitat with bountiful resources. As such, underground beings tend to live close together, founding their cities in the scattered handful of caverns capable of supporting life. There, they fiercely defend themselves against all challengers. Above, cities grow as sentient beings come together for mutual defense, social interaction, or trade. Below, These familiar trappings are twisted by the psychology that the dark, labyrinthine tunnels impose, the unending struggle for scarce resources, and racial histories of exile and bitterness. By nature, most Underdark cultures turn in on themselves, veneration of evil powers flourishes, and cruelty reigns unchecked. Most Deep Realm cities are xenophobic enclaves dominated by one or two races that wage genocidal war on their neighbors, practice extensive slave trading, and rule through intolerant monotheistic theocracies. Only an elite minority of Underdark city dwellers dare to travel the tunnels between civilizations. And rare are the civilizations that grow beyond a single city-state for any significant length of time. A wide range of sentient beings have established cities in the Underdark, although the diversity of intelligent life does not yet match that found on the surface. Many established races of the Underdark are not native. Instead, their ancestors were driven underground as punishment for hideous crimes. Others immigrated voluntarily, and a few are believed to have evolved in the endless darkness. Of these races, 9 stand out due to their cultures and interaction with the surface world: aboleth, beholders, cloakers, drow, dwarves, illithids, ixen, quatoa, and sverfneblin. These are by no means the most powerful or even most prolific race in the Underdark. But these have been the most prominent and deadly in recent centuries.
Aboleth are loathsome, lawful, evil amphibians resembling plump fish, 20 feet long from their bulbous heads to their fluke-like tails. Most have blue-green bodies with gray splotches. Their pinkish-tan underbellies conceal a toothless, rubbery mouth. 3 red eyes like slits protected by bony ridges sit in a column on the front of their heads. 4 pulsating dark blue orifices line the bottom of their bodies and secrete gray slime that smells like rancid grease. 4 leathery tentacles, each 10 feet in length, grow from their heads. Aboleth are difficult to look at as they are to deal with. In water, aboleth propel themselves with their tails. On land, they use their tentacles to drag themselves along. The tentacles have another function too, transforming land dwellers into semi-aquatic beings. At touch, a victim's skin becomes clear and slimy, requiring near constant immersion. Fortunately, aboleth naturally release a mucus cloud when submerged that enables land dwellers to breathe underwater. Unfortunately, this is a land dweller's hook into slavery. Using natural psionics, these monsters can create realistic illusions, complete with audible, olfactory, and other sensory components. In addition, they use psionics to enslave other creatures and communicate telepathically. About 2% of the population, notable for the bony ridges protecting their oversized craniums and calcified nodules along their unusually tough tentacles, possess the exceptional mental gifts to become savants. Savant aboleth are even more difficult than their kin in mental domination. They are also powerful wizards and priests capable of spellcasting and creating magical symbols through psionic force. Savant aboleth typically attain up to 14th level as wizards and up to 12th level as priests. The origins of aboleth are lost in the midst of primordial time, and they are believed to have evolved to their present state in the deepest Underdark. Perhaps shaped by dark primeval powers long forgotten by other races, aboleth acquire all of their parents' knowledge at birth, plus the knowledge of any intelligent being they consume. Thus, they hold countless ancient secrets of their own past as well as those of many other races they have devoured. Savant aboleth use a complex symbol system for all written communication. Purloined fragments of these writings provide the only lore regarding these mysterious and horrifying beings that has passed into the hands of other races. Great aboleth cities, as well as the savant aboleth who rule them, are found only in the deepest Underdark, but individual common aboleth are sometimes encountered in aquatic settings in the upper and middle Underdark. Although the aboleth are the unchallenged rulers of the lower Underdark across Faerun, their domination is felt most in the eastern and southern reaches of the continent, beneath the oldest human kingdoms. For millennia, they have existed unchallenged and unchanging, slowly bringing more and more beings under their control. Cabals of a savant aboleth organize and run aboleth societies as rulers and dominators. They rarely leave their cities, sending ordinary aboleth to capture slaves and collect food. In some communities, a single savant aboleth rises above its peers and assumes the title of Grand Savant. But even a Grand Savant's power is never absolute. Savant aboleths make decisions through consensus, engaging in prolonged debates through telepathic communication. They rarely act hastily. Savant aboleth are always hungry for magical items and lore. They share their mastery of magic skills and their knowledge of dark arcane secrets with each other through long periods of telepathic communication. Although need not memorize wizard spells, regaining them automatically through rest, Savant aboleth are believed to be able to exchange spells, and thus slowly alter their roster of available magic. The greatest savants are capable of wizardry to rival the most powerful archmages, but their skills at producing glyphs and magical symbols are believed to be the vessel of their most powerful magical manipulations. While some aboleth venerate Gwandador, particularly in its aspect as Jubilex the Slime Lord, most common aboleth and all savant aboleth worship the Blood Queen. The wizard priests who make up her clergy ruthlessly follow her creed of domination and oppression. Aboleth cities are typically found at the bottom of great subterranean lakes up to 300 feet below the water's surface. Aboleth can survive far deeper, but few of their surface-dwelling slaves can join them without magical protection from the pressure and cold. Such cities are composed of great stone towers of different heights, although most are 1 or 2 stories with smooth, fluted, spiraling contours that appear evil and alien, yet strangely beautiful. Many walls have arabesque decorations, with what appear to be rubbery tentacle frowns covered with a thin coat of slime. Ceilings range from 10 to 25 feet in height. Typical building decor includes murals, urns, vases, statuettes set in alcoves created by fluted internal walls. An aboleth dwells alone in its towers. Aside from its slaves, the grandest towers are inhabited by savant aboleth. Slaves are typically barracked in the upper reaches of such towers. Great sloping ramps replace the curved stairs found in surface structures, and most portals are intricately carved archways. Although their cities only occupy a fraction of any given Underdark lake, aboleth literally dominate all intelligent life in the vicinity, extending their rule throughout a lake and the surrounding caverns. As a result, few other races willingly reside near an aboleth city. Those that do are small and thoroughly dominated. Aboleth consume nearly any organic matter, deriving most of their subsistence from algae and microorganisms. They rely on their natural weaponry, magic, and psionic skills for most of their food, so they have little need for agriculture, animal husbandry, mining, smithing, or any other civilized activities. However, aboleth do maintain great kelp farms and deep-growth herds to sustain their slave population, and quarries to build their great stone towers. Explorers can easily overlook the presence of a major aboleth city. The marks are subtle. Few inhabitants in the region, unintended Roth herds on isolated islands and vast kelp beds along the lake floor. Aboleth have no natural enemies and are greatly feared by the Underdark races. These monsters view all other intelligent races as either food or slaves. Only Ixen, despite their chaotic nature, exhibit a natural affinity for the aboleth and serve them willingly. Many aboleth cities employ scum, a race bred from humanoid genetic stock to serve as beasts of burden and powerful fighting machines. Scum do not resemble their humanoid ancestors, possessing a tail like an aboleth and 4 extremely strong limbs. Each limb extends in a webbed paw with 2 fingers and an opposable thumb, and each digit ends in a retractable claw. A scum's body is covered with a clear, slimy, hairless, grayish-green membrane. Scum lack external ears, and their eyes are like an aboleth's, an eerie shade of purplish red, but more spherical. Beholders. Beholders are known as eye tyrants, and spheres of many eyes, are a race of intelligent, typically lawful evil monsters. They appear as large orbs dominated by a central eye and a large, toothy maw, with 10 smaller eyes on stalks sprouting from the top of the orb. Beholders on Tyrell grow as large as 6 feet in diameter. Most tend to have cool hues such as purple and blue on top, graduating down to earth tones on bottom. Their skin is pebbly, and they possess visible nostrils. Beholders levitate for support. allowing them to float about slowly. In addition to their deadly bite, beholders produce magical powers from their eyes. Their central eye emits an anti-magic ray, which cancels all magic in a 90-degree arc in front of a beholder. Small eyes have other powers. Beholder offspring often exhibit wildly varying mutations. Despite the efforts of beholder parents to eradicate mutants, subraces known as beholderkin often spring up. Oddly, each subrace considers itself a representation of one proper breed. Although true beholders, allowable variations exist, hive mothers found in rural communities known as hives. Hive mothers also spawn abominations, specialty breeds created to meet community needs, including defense or extra firepower during invasions. Elder orbs are ancient eye tyrants capable of casting wizard spells, who sometimes find their own hives. Beholder mages are younger orbs who have foregone their powers of their central eye to cast wizard spells. Beholders are believed to hail from the heavens, most likely the wandering star known in some cultures as Hakath. Their presence in Faerun is believed to date back to spelljammer crashes a few millennia ago. Successful hides survive by making their way into the Underdark before attempting to dominate the lands above and below. Eye tyrants are typically found in the upper Underdark, although tales flourish of mutants who flee deep into the earth and establish their own hives in the middle of the lower Underdark. Rogue individuals are also found in most surface regions. One beholder hive is known to have crashed in the Elmir Mountains and now dominates much of the Underdark east of the Kalimshan and south of the Vilhon Reach. A second breed has long been active in eastern Anaruk and the deep realms of the Moonsea region. A third lesser-known hive has expanded throughout the tunnels of the Great Peak Mountains in the lands once claimed by the dwarves of Anamirandar. Individual beholders are found throughout the realms below, often allied with or served by individuals of other races. A single hive mother rules each beholder city, advised by a ruling council of other hive mothers who perform lesser administrative tasks. Magic, and to a lesser extent psionics, play a great role in such societies. In fact, spellcasting, spell-like abilities, and psionic powers are a beholder's main interaction with its environment, supplemented by charmed minions. Beholders that use wizard spells usually research unique spells, and all eye tyrants create unique magical items. Most spells researched by beholder mages and elder orbs duplicate common spells, but require only verbal components. Most of a beholder's unique spells enhance or modify its natural abilities. Common beholder constructs such as mouthpicks and beholder armor facilitate interaction with the physical world. Mouthpicks are long poles held in the mouth that sport tools or weapons on one end. These are used when telekinesis is inconvenient. Beholder armor is basically enchanted plate mail that beholders settle on top of. This armor allows them faster movement and the ability to use hands. Eye tyrants of the Underdark typically venerate one or both of the two racial deities, the Great Mother, whose portfolios encompass magic, fertility, and tyranny, and Gesnid, whose areas of control include gases and fogs, obscurement, and deception. Beholders have no priest caste, but the Great Mother sometimes elevates hive mothers to priestess status when pressed by enemies. Gesnid does not grant powers or spells to his followers, mostly because his name is hard to pronounce. Alright, no, don't scratch that. Alright. Beholders who venerate other gods such as Bane or his successor try to remain in shallow caverns near the surface. Eye tyrant cities are difficult to recognize from afar, as they are rarely composed of freestanding edifices in large caverns. Rather, beholder hives adapt natural cavern complexes or rifts in the earth with their disintegration powers. Such cities have limited access, typically only one opening large enough to admit a beholder. But cities are designed so their inhabitants can quickly carve an escape route should they need to retreat. Beholder cities boasting humanoid minions are usually spread out horizontally so the humanoids can function. However, cities populated only by eye tyrants are constructed vertically to hinder interlopers incapable of aerial movement in tight confines. Individual dwellings resemble warped nests, consisting of vertical tubes artfully blasted into the stone, interconnecting by cross shafts at varying levels. Vast amphitheaters provide forums for eye tyrants to gather, recite ritualized stories of victory and compete in magical or athletic contests. The architecture of such enclaves is dominated by the artistry of stone carvings and sculptures, forming alien landscapes scattered with trophies. Many of these trophies are petrified representatives of other races that serve both as artistic displays and ready food stores. Explorers rarely come across beholder cities on their own. When they do, it is usually through inadvertent tunneling. More often, explorers are captured in the wilds of the Underdark, charmed and brought back to the city to serve as minions or carefully petrified artwork. Tyrants consider all other races as well as other breeds of beholder and beholderkin to be lesser creatures who exist only to be enslaved or consumed. They commonly refer to all such beings as meat. Beholders respect more powerful creatures, but only so far as to carefully plan attempts to destroy them. Beholder hives and cities never ally with cities populated by other beholder breeds or other races, although they may refrain from attacking if expedient. However, individual beholders, particularly those who have been exiled for their demented beliefs, sometimes deign to ally themselves with individuals of other races. Cloakers, also known as lurkers in shadows and chasm rays, resemble common black cloaks with rows of black eye spots running down their backs like buttons. Two ivory-colored claws on the upper edge of the cloaker's form are easily mistaken for bone clasps. The white underside of a cloak bears a horrific horned face composed of two glowing red eyes and a ravenous maw. A whip-like tail completes its monstrous form. Cloakers fly with blinding speed, engulfing prey within their folds. While devouring victims, cloakers defend themselves with their tails. In addition, they emit subsonic moans with varying effects that induce unease, fear, nausea, weakness, or paralyzation. Cloakers also manipulate shadows to obscure opponents' vision or produce precise images. Cloakers' thought process are utterly alien to most other life forms. As such, only mages who devote long hours to training their minds in the arcane discipline can understand them. A rare elite form of cloaker, known as a cloaker lord, appears as a large black cloak, such as an ogre or a giant might wear. Cloaker lords' powers and abilities correspond to those of normal cloakers, but with significant enhancements. Otherwise, they are physically identical to their lesser kin. Cloakers have lived in the Underdark since the earliest recorded dwarf explorations. Their origins are lost in the midst of history. Many scholars have noted the close physical resemblance of cloakers to other flying greys. Others suggest a kinship between cloakers and bats, pointing to sinisters in particular. A closer study reveals that while some ancestral kinship may exist between cloakers and other races, chasm rays are decidedly alien. A few sages go so far as to speculate that cloakers are descendants of an ancient race of proto-rays or proto-bats. Proto-rays who made their way into the demi-plane of shadow for a time before returning to the Underdark. All agree that cloakers have long resided in the realms below. Cloaker lords seem to be relatively recent occurrence, arising within the past few centuries. An explanation of their manifestations still eludes scholars. Possibly cloaker lords have existed for as long as a common cloaker, but remained hidden for millennia because making their existence known, if true, that begs the question of why cloaker lords have been chosen to appear now within recorded history, and why no evidence of cloaker civilization dates back more than a few centuries. Cloakers are found individually in a small group throughout the lower and middle Underdark. They establish cities only when drawn together by one or more cloaker lords. Cloaker lords hold a natural domination effect over common cloakers, drawing normally solitary cloakers together into raiding bands, small communities, and even cities. If more than one cloaker lord is present, then the rulers draw together periodically to form a conclave of shadows, a body with no established leader that requires unanimity on any decision. When a conclave of shadows is convened, the assembled representatives form a ring, or in rare cases a sphere, by positioning themselves at different orientations and grasping each other with their claws. Such formations then undergo a temporary transformation, not yet understood, that results in a ring or sphere of living shadow stuff and an apparent merging of minds. When the cloaker lords disengage, they resume their original individual forms and disperse to carry out the conclave's decision. Although cloakers and cloaker lords historically do not exhibit spellcasting powers, their ties to the demiplane of shadow are strong and apparently growing. As such, other races have begun to report that a few cloaker lords seem to be developing the ability to cast wizard spells from the School of Shadow as spell-like effects. Others report that cloakers seem to travel through physical obstacles, lending credence to the suggestion that they can briefly shift into the demiplane of shadows and emerge elsewhere. Finally, the increasing frequency of gloomwings, shadelings, tenebros worms, and umbrals, shadow animals akin to animantals, near cloaker enclaves suggest that the cloakers summon such creatures to the prime material plane, possibly even controlling them. Unlike nearly all other sentient races of the Underdark, cloakers do not appear to venerate any particular deity. Other races, with the notable exception of Darrow, refer to individual cloakers as Dinkarazan's mantle, a fanciful linking of the lost, mad demi-power of the Darrow to the alien thought process of the cloakers. Cloaker cities are built into the roofs of great subterranean caverns or on the sides of steep Underdark chasms. Favored locations include places with massive stalactites and towering chasm walls, inaccessible to those without flight or levitation. While cloakers do not dominate any one region of the deep earth, their isolated enclaves are rarely contested. Such strongholds are nearly impregnable to other races. If not for the tendencies of cloakers to hunt other nearby races, it would be simple enough to share such prized living spaces with those who prefer the more accessible cavern floors. More than one explorer has entered a large cave and mistaken the hordes of dark flying creatures for bats, only to realize with horror that he or she has misjudged the scale of the subterranean cavern and that hundreds of cloakers are flittering overhead. Whether hewn into a rock face or a dangling stalactite, cloaker cities are recognizable for the countless apertures through which they enter and leave. Within a cloaker enclave, most passages are extremely high and narrow, rarely more than a few inches wide. Cloakers navigate such passageways by flattening their bodies and inching along with their claws. Chambers resemble hemispheres with smooth, rounded ceilings and wildly uneven floors with sharp spikes and crevices everywhere. The floors serve as both alien tapestries for the cloakers to contemplate as well as defensive mechanisms, preventing flightless races from establishing solid footing. While cloakers are capable of mining, agriculture, and trading, they would rather enslave other races to do these jobs for them. Some cloaker communities keep captive herds of deep growth penned in a cavern floor below their communities. Such examples of animal husbandry are exceptional, however. Sages suggest this fact indicates that cloaker society incorporates the hunt into societal ritual. Aside from an eerie, uninhabited region, the most obvious signal of a large community of cloakers is the warding song, a great barrier of sound created by a cloaker choir. The cacophony created by hundreds of cloakers emitting subsonic moans of increasingly intensity can echo through the Underdark for miles, creating panic and uncomprehending terror in communities far away with a slight shift of a breeze or an echo. Warding songs start and stop without any discernible pattern and thus are impossible to predict. While not truly evil, cloakers view all other races as prey. A few cloaker realms have allied themselves with other races, such as the Ixen, though again, this is a rare exception. Other flying rays, including lurkers, mantry, and trappers, are treated as favored servitors. Some creatures, such as deep-spawn and floaters, are forced into servitude by the powers of the cloaker lord's moans. Deep spawn serve as means to renew food stocks. Floaters who resemble long, puffed-up purple worms with tiny shimmering wings and rows on either side are enormous gas bags ranging from 20 to 100 yards long and up to 20 yards in diameter, who serve as beasts of burden. The Drow. The Drow, also known as dark elves, are chaotic, evil elves with skin like polished obsidian. Shorter and more slender than humans, they have pale eyes, stark white hair, and finely chiseled features. Drow move silently and have superior infravision, but are adversely affected by any sort of bright light. All dark elves train in magic and have high magic resistance. They can cast dancing lights, fairy fire, and darkness once per day. More powerful Drow can also cast levitate, know alignment, and detect magic. Priests and priestesses have additional granted powers as well. Driders are monstrous creatures with the head and torso of a drow and the legs and lower body of a giant spider. Lolth, the spider queen, creates driders from drow who failed their goddess test. Outcast from their communities, driders are usually found alone or in the company of giant spiders on the edge of drow civilization. The drow once lived in the lands of light alongside their fairer kindred. More than 13,000 years ago, the crown wars raged among the fair folk. For 3,000 years, the elven nations of Avendar, Miritar, Chantel, Aether, Canterbury, and several other ones I can't pronounce, and others battled one another in a series of 5 great conflicts. At the end of the Fourth Crown War, circa 10,000 DR, the corrupt Dark Elven, Eletri, and others were transformed by Corellian's magic into drow as directed through the Protector's priest and high mages, and banished to the lightless depths of the Underdark. The first drow civilization rose in the Underdark in southern Faerun circa 9600 DR. The first great kingdom of the drow was Telantiwar, with its great capital in the great cavern of Bahadrin, the conquered heart of the first great kingdom of the Stout Folk, which was seized by the drow in 9000 DR. The drow fought amongst themselves, noble against noble, priest against priest, for rule of their new realm. This war ended amid great magical explosions that brought down the roof of Bahadrin. The ceiling collapsed entirely, burying many drow in the shattered dwarven cities they had seized. The cavern, now open to the sky, became known as the Great Rift. Gold dwarf ancestors later resettled the chasm and surrounding caverns to form the Deep Realm. The following dysphoria, known as the Scattering, the surviving drow nobles and priests gathered what people, slaves, and equipment they could seize and fled into the Underdark. Since that time, countless cities and smaller settlements have risen and fallen in an increasing radius around the territory held by the Empire of Telantiwar. Drow are now found throughout the upper and middle Underdark of all of Faerun and beyond. Dark elven cities are typically located in regions with strong magnetic forces, where the rock gives off radiation akin to magical energy known as Fadris. The Drow are particularly strong in the Moonsea, north and west of the Izakar Range, from beneath Calcium all the way up to Icewind Dell, but their pervasive influence is felt throughout the Underdark, and few races challenge the Dark Elf's subterranean mastery. Due to the dogma of Lolth, the Spider Queen, most drow cities are theocratic matriarch, dominated by the clergy of one of the handful of dark powers venerated by dark elves. In cities that follow the way of Lolth, the dark elven populace is typically ruled by several dozen noble houses ranked in strict hierarchy. A small group of elite noble houses form the ruling council, led by the premier high priestess of the first house. Each noble house is turned and ruled by a courtier of high priestesses related and ranked in preeminence, with the highest ranking priestess of each noble house bearing the title of matron mother. A constant, intense, treacherous, and deadly competition seethes among the various noble houses, mirrored by the constant struggle among individual priestesses to increase relative station. These battles follow rules of behavior best characterized as, if it cannot be proven, then it did not happen. The war among drow nobility allows other groups to also achieve some power and influence. Drow wizards, who are usually male, often ally with a noble house. Merchant trading companies receive noble backing. Mercenaries sell their blades, all shifting the balance of power. In a drow city, where other powers check Lolth's priestesses, they may even assume rule of the city. But the constant struggle for a station does not stop. In cities where Lolth's worship is unknown or marginal, different power structures emerge. But these too are festering pools of intrigue and treachery. The only absolute appears to be that if more than one divine power is openly venerated, civil war and societal collapse are inevitable. The premier goddess of the Drow is Lolth the Spider Queen, goddess of spiders, evil, darkness, chaos, and assassins. Other powerful deities, including Grandadar the Elder Eye, the god of ooze, slimes, jellies, outcasts, ropers, rebels, and all things subterranean. The Veharan, the Mass Lord, the god of thievery, drow males, territory, and evil activity on the surface world. Lesser powers include Karansali, the Reverencer, goddess of the undead and vengeance, and Selvtarm, the champion of Lolth, god of Drow warriors. Finally, although she is rarely venerated in the Underdark, Elistri, the Dark Maiden, is the good-aligned goddess of song, beauty, swordwork, hunting, and moonlight, who seeks to redeem the Drow and lead them back to the lands of light. Drow wizards and priests are known throughout the Underdark and surface world for mass-producing unusual weapons and clothing with quasi-magical properties. Such properties are particularly the result of exposure to the fair dress, a powerful and strange radiation found only in the Underdark. Drow society live and die by the proximity of Fadris to their cities. Though the enchantments fade in the sunlight, they are terrors in the Underdark. Aside from the items, Drow spellcasters can also develop countless new spells. Many are even adopted by other wizard schools and clergies of other faiths. Drow cities are similar to surface cities in that they are laid out horizontally and consist of buildings clustered into districts, intertwined with wide avenues, narrow alleys, and plazas. They differ in the absence of wood, although petrified mushroom stalks often serve the same purpose. The use of modified cave structures instead of freestanding buildings, and the general lack of ramps and stairs within many upper-class habitations. Elite Drow usually have quasi-magical clothing that allows them to levitate. Drow architecture betrays ancient elven origins in its artistry. Dark elves favor soaring, sculpted structures whose strength stems as much from magic as a natural strength of the stone. Drow cities are notable for their intricate spiral tunnels, bodily flying stone bridges, balconies, and buttresses. Dark elven engineers hollow out and shape stalactites, stalagmites, and cave columns for habitation. Rock is always cut and shaped, never left unworked. Drow city environs are a maze of well-patrolled tunnels that serve both as a training ground for Drow warriors and a defensive fortification as they fall back through a warren of deceptions and traps. The most obvious sign of the Drow activity outside the city proper include guarded caverns where quasi-magical items are fabricated, heavily warded channels throughout which water is diverted to the city, worked by Dwarven and Dark Gnome slaves and overseen by Dark Elf taskmasters. Often a small region of caverns and tunnels is given over to dried or outcast and used as a means of dispensing of prisoners unsuitable for sacrifice. While fungi fields and herds of Roth are typically kept within each city's central cavern, some Drow caverns are too small and are forced to locate their food supplies outside the city. Further afield, Drow patrols are infrequent but regular, as Dark Elves are the great merchants of the Underdark. The various merchant consortiums are a regular presence along established trade routes of the realm below. Giant subterranean lizards act as beasts of burden, with Drow warriors mounted on riding lizards as outriders. Dark Elves extend their own caste and gender-based prejudices to other races as well. While the Dark Elves willingly trade with nearly any race, even good-aligned races such as dwarves and dark gnomes, if a willingness to trade is reciprocated, the Dark Elves consider themselves inherently superior and will destroy their trading partners without compunction. Dark Elves reserve their greatest hatred for their surface kin and even conduct surface raids expressly for the purpose of killing and enslaving elves. Because many other races loathe the Drow, the Dark Elves are never without potential enemies. Dwarves, also known as stout folk, are found both above and below the surface. Dwarves are relatively short compared to humans, but very stocky and muscular. They have ruddy cheeks, bright eyes, and deep tan or light brown skin. Their hair is usually black, gray, or brown, and worn long, and all dwarves, both male and female, prize their long and carefully groomed beards and mustaches. Dwarves are a highly non-magical race, resistant to toxic substances and magical domers. The stout folk are gifted with improvision and natural instincts regarding construction. Most dwarves are skilled warriors, versed in combat against common foes including goblins, goblinoids, orcs, ogres, trolls, giants, giantkin. The dwarf race is fragmented into half a dozen races and sub-races. Most dwarven legends trace their earliest settlements back tens of thousands of years to the great mountain range Yemahal. Scholars believe that in an exodus from the Yemahal, the stout folk split into 2 or 3 major branches and spread across Faerun. Karatur, Zakhara. Those who came to Faerun are believed to have settled beneath modern Sephrar before spreading westward, eventually fragmenting into 4 subraces. The first great Faerunian dwarven kingdom centered in the cavern of Bahardin, beneath the Shar. The dwarves' first great schism came with the founding of Shanatar beneath much of southwestern Faerun. Emigrants from Shanatar merged with the scattered dwarf enclaves in the region to form a distinct subrace known today as the Shield Dwarfs. Shield Dwarfs eventually founded most of the great dwarven nations of north, from Agrugan to Granagar. From the earlier Shield Dwarfs, Durmathoin then created the Urdunren. After the Crown Wars and the descent of the Dark Elves, Beirindin and the surrounding territories fell to the Drow, and the dwarves of southern Faerun were driven into exile and scattered. Dwarves who fled as far as the Chult abandoned their underground homes, interbred with the small enclaves of dwarfs already dwelling there, and became the ancestors of the wild dwarfs who dwell on the Chult Peninsula today. After the first Drow kingdom of Talantawar tore itself apart in civil war, the great cavern of Bahardin collapsed to form the Great Rift. Those dwarfs who resettled the caverns surrounding the Great Rift were ancestors of the Gold Dwarfs, or Hill Dwarfs. The last great schism occurred when Alethids enslaved an entire clan of Shield Dwarfs, Clan Dugar, sometime before the founding of Deep Shanatar. The Dugar were long absent from Shanatar before their rediscovery, and spread through much of the Underdark during the intervening period. Some speculate that the legendary Duro may have been the result of the Illithid breeding experiments between Duergar and humans. Other minor branches of dwarves, including the desert dwarves of Mazdaka, the arctic dwarfs of the Great Glacier, and the albino dwarfs of Chult, are isolated branches of shield dwarfs. Legends of an aquatic race of dwarfs in the Sea of Fallen Stars are conclusively discredited by every scholar who looks into the question. The stout folk today are enmeshed in a slow decline. At one time, shield dwarfs stretched from their ancestral home beneath Kalimshan to the spine of the world and up around the Moonsea. Gold dwarfs had established kingdoms stretching from the Shar all the way across southern Faerun, up and around the eastern end of the Sea of Fallen Stars. The Grey Dwarfs held great caverns throughout the Middle Underdark. Most of the great dwarven realms have now fallen, their halls occupied by foul monsters. No one knows the reasons behind the decline. Explanations revolve around the dwarfs' low birth rate and their near-genocidal conflicts with orcs and goblins. The low birth rates may have been caused by an evolutionary response to their long lifespans, millennia of exposure to the magical radiations of the Underdark, working overmuch with heavy ores and excessive clan inbreeding. The Stalfolk are found throughout the upper Underdark, typically in and among the great mountain ranges of the surface world. With small scattered enclaves in the middle Underdark, in recent millennia, dwarves have ceded much of their ancient territory. They now gather in their last great enclave, centered around the richest veins of ore in the Underdark, heavily fortified against outsiders. Dwarves of every stripe retain a close affiliation with their family, clan, and realm. All clans have chiefs who go by varying titles, and except among the Darrow and Dugar, hold their positions by election. Groups of clans together make up a realm, traditionally ruled by hereditary kings. Lately, few such kingdoms remain, and a monarch's personal popularity and fitness to rule is increasingly viewed as important. Every clan has its elder dwarfs of influence, wealth, personal might, and distinguished age. Clan elders shape the lives of clan members, and their votes determine policy, law, and justice. Clan elders once could approve or deny marriages, renouncing the membership of any who married against their will or outside the clan. However, the dwindling birth rates of the Stalfolk have ended such influence. Dwarves are famous throughout the realms above and below for their technological mastery, their mining prowess, and the beauty and durability of their craftsmanship. Despite their inherent non-magical nature, dwarves have mastered the art of forging enchanted weapons and armor. Likewise, dwarven priests are skilled spellcasters as long as they retain their holy symbols. Less understood is the ability of dwarves to create powerful rune magic. Folk believe that the dwindling ranks of dwarven runecasters once worked great feats of enduring magic throughout the Underdark. These effects continue to be felt today, and their impact rivaled that of elven high mages. Dwarves are far more pious than many surface races suspect, devoutly venerating their pantheon. the Mordinsaman, the Dwarven guards are said to have sprung from stone and earth, beginning with Moradin. Beranar is universally held to be Moradin's wife, and many Dwarven theologians believe all the other Dwarven powers are their descendants. Although the exact ordering of ancestry varies from myth to myth, after Moradin and Beranar, the oldest Dwarven powers are thought to be Dumathoin, Abathor, Ludogor, Clangadin, Sharindlar, and the twins Dinkarzan and Darinka. The next group of Dwarven gods commonly worshipped in the realms include Thardhar, Gorm Guthin, Mothhammer Durn, Dugmarin Brightmantle, and recent additions to the pantheon said to be the grandchildren of Moradin and Beranar have included Hela, Brightaxe, and Deep Dora. Masters of engineering, dwarves completely reshape their subterranean environments. The stout folk have a great feel for stone, and their stonework strengthens and enhances the earth's natural structures. As a result, Dwarven architecture radiates enduring strength and is apt to outlive its creators by many generations. The stout folk favor freestanding columns and great arches, smooth, clean lines that display the beauty of the stone. Dwarven communities take root in the great natural caverns of the Underdark near rich veins of ore, living in and among the rock itself. Passages into and out of Dwarven enclaves are heavily trapped and easily navigable only by dwarves. Dwarven homes are often built into terraced cavern walls, part freestanding and part dug into the rock. The stout folk are ever vigilant against threats from the tunnels below. Heavily armed and armored patrols of fierce Dwarven warriors regularly tromp through the surrounding environs of a Dwarven community. Dwarves settle relatively close to areas of volcanic activity, so their smithies lie near natural forges and rich veins of ore. This also leaves a maze of tunnels in the vicinity of caverns in which they dwell. However, dwarves have a much better understanding of the environment in which they dwell than do miners of other races, and as a result leave far less evidence of their mining activities than one might suspect. And I suspect that this video is getting long about now, so this is going to wrap up our first part of Drizzt Guide to the Underdark. And I'll see you real soon with some more monstery goodness. If you stuck around this long, I thank you. Please smack that subscribe and assault that like button, and we'll get back to you real soon with some more monstery goodness. Until then, stay frosty and aware, beautiful people. Thank you. Thank you very much.